Okay, picture this. You've got a highly advanced machine hunting deadly sea mines completely on its own, deep beneath the waves. Sounds like sci-fi, right? Well, here is the absolutely massive paradox. You literally need more government paperwork to fly a $50 toy drone in your local park than you do to deploy one of these autonomous underwater robots. And India's Navy, they are deploying exactly these kinds of autonomous underwater drones right now. But get this, there is absolutely no single national law governing who else is allowed to put one of these in the water. Wild, right?
Welcome to today's Explainer. Our mission is to completely map out the legal and technological landscape of underwater drones in Indian coastal waters. We're going to explore exactly how this incredible tech is totally outpacing the rulebooks and, why this sort of regulatory Wild West directly impacts global security and, honestly, the oceans we all rely on.
Okay, let's dive into this. We've got a 5-part agenda today. First, we'll meet the drones. Second, we'll look at the domestic legal gap. Third, the layers of international maritime law. Fourth, what happens when drones spark standoffs. And finally, India's defense tech boom.
All right, Part 1. Meet the underwater drones.
So before we tackle the actual laws, we absolutely have to ask, what exactly is an underwater drone? I'm asking this directly because, well, it's super common to just think of all unmanned underwater machines as one big monolith. But as you'll see in a moment, regulators and insurers treat them vastly differently based on exactly what they do, and more importantly, how they connect to their human operators.
We basically have 3 main types here. First up is the ROV, or remotely operated vehicle. This one is physically tethered to a surface vessel by a cable. You've got real-time human control and virtually unlimited endurance. Next, we have the AUV, the autonomous underwater vehicle. Now these are completely untethered. Because an AUV runs on pre-programmed missions, it's essentially a fire-and-forget system. It can vanish for days, going completely unaccounted for underwater and only report back data once it resurfaces. Finally, there's the USV, or unmanned surface vehicle. This stays on top of the water, often towing sensors below it rather than actually submerging itself. And the legal and security concerns, they scale up sharply as we move from a tethered ROV, where you can literally trace the cable back to a specific human, to a completely independent AUV. That lack of a physical leash is exactly why regulators view AUVs with extreme caution. I mean, if something goes wrong, you can't just pull it back.
Moving on to Part 2, the domestic legal gap.
Now, if you follow Indian tech laws, you probably know all about the DGCA's Aerial Drone Rules of 2021. You might logically assume that those aerial rules simply extend beneath the waves, right? Well, they definitively do not. The DGCA rules govern aircraft operating in airspace, and they explicitly exclude underwater vehicles. That entire licensing apparatus, the remote pilot certificates, the unique identification numbers, the digital sky platform, has absolutely no application to anything operating below the waterline. So the really crucial takeaway here is that India currently has no single, unified national regulatory framework for commercial underwater drone operations. None.
But we do have to be a little nuanced here. It's not a totally lawless space, okay? Instead, commercial underwater drone activity is governed by this patchwork of existing authorities. Think about it like a giant puzzle. If you're near a port, you deal with the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways. If you wander into restricted maritime zones, well, the Navy and Coast Guard take over. Doing offshore oil work, that's the Directorate General of Hydrocarbons, and the IRDAI steps in purely on the insurance side. Just imagine trying to launch a commercial ocean cleaning drone. You might actually have to juggle permissions from 4 different ministries just to get the thing in the water. Everyone has a specific slice of authority depending on where the drone is and what it's doing, but there is simply no purpose-built, unified framework for the machines themselves.
Let's zoom out to Part 3. International maritime law layers.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how international treaties come into play. Let's unpack UNCLOS. That's the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Article 20 lays out the rules for what they call innocent passage through another state's territorial sea. That's the 12 nautical mile zone sitting directly off a country's coast. It requires 2 distinct steps for underwater vehicles. Step 1, navigate on the surface. Step 2, show your flag. In plain English, an AUV transiting India's territorial sea without surfacing isn't automatically covered by the right of innocent passage. Surfacing and flying a flag isn't just an optional courtesy, it is the mandatory condition to transit legally. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Forcing a drone to navigate on the surface completely defeats the purpose of having an underwater vehicle in the first place. Surfacing compromises stealth, it ruins battery efficiency, and it disrupts critical data collection.
Then we have UNCLOS, Part 13, which deals specifically with marine scientific research.
This establishes a strict legal regime requiring coastal state consent. For a state like India, this grants full discretion within their territorial sea and a highly qualified consent regime stretching way out into its exclusive economic zone, or EEZ, that 200 nautical mile stretch of water where India has special rights over marine resources. Now, this proves that operating a civilian or scientific AUV survey mission inside India's EEZ is absolutely not a legal free-for-all. It still sits firmly inside a strict consent-based regime that India can invoke, especially if that research relates to natural resources.
Which brings us to part 4, when drones spark standoffs.
Let's look at a real-world case study to show just how high the geopolitical stakes actually are. We're going to trace the USNS Bowditch incident from December 2016. On day 1, a U.S. Navy survey ship deployed an oceanographic underwater drone in the Philippines' EEZ. Almost immediately, that very same day, a Chinese warship seized it. For the next several days, a massive, tense diplomatic dispute raged. The U.S. described the mission as lawful scientific research in international waters, while China basically treated it as an intelligence-gathering intrusion. It wasn't until day 6 that the drone was finally returned. The real ambiguity here is the gray zone written into the UNCLOS treaty itself. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to prove if a drone mapping the seafloor is just conducting innocent scientific research or if it's mapping submarine routes for military intelligence. This timeline shows us exactly how one nation's lawful research can instantly trigger a high-stakes jurisdictional standoff.
All right, our final section, part 5. India's defense tech boom.
Bringing it back home to India, we see a huge contrast. While the civilian law is seriously lagging, the defense establishment is moving incredibly fast. The DRDO's Naval Science and Technological Laboratory, or NSTL, in Vishakhapatnam is actively developing the HUAV. That stands for High Endurance Autonomous Underwater Vehicle. Make no mistake, this is not some hobbyist gadget. This platform is built for intense, heavy-duty tasks like anti-submarine warfare, mine countermeasures, intelligence gathering, and detailed seabed mapping.
To truly grasp the massive scale of this technology, just look at the number 6. The HUAV weighs roughly 6 tons and measures about 10 meters long. This is serious, heavy-duty naval infrastructure.
Next up, the number 15. This highlights its sheer operational independence. The HEUAV boasts up to 15 days of endurance. That literally means it can detach from a surface vessel and run complex, pre-programmed autonomous missions for over 2 solid weeks before anyone even hears from it again. No human intervention whatsoever.
And finally, 300. This machine is capable of diving down to 300 meters in depth. To put that into perspective for you, that's like sinking the entire Eiffel Tower underwater. It operates in an environment of crushing pressure and total pitch-black isolation. That kind of environment demands absolute technological perfection.
But listen, the AOUV is really just the tip of the spear here. We're seeing a complete ecosystem emerging. NSTL has rolled out man-portable AUVs equipped with side-scan sonar and deep learning algorithms specifically for finding sea mines. They're establishing coordinated multi-AUV operations using advanced acoustic communication so these drones can literally talk to each other underwater. Furthermore, the Indian Coast Guard is explicitly pursuing autonomous surface vessels for EEZ monitoring and counter-IED operations around vital port approaches. And this brilliantly illustrates our core finding today. Defense procurement and military operational authority are running on a completely separate, exponentially faster track than civilian law.
The state's own technological capability is scaling far, far faster than the rulebook governing anyone else who might want to operate in those exact same waters. Which really leaves us with this final provocative question to consider. How will unified civilian statutes ever catch up to the sheer pace of autonomous military technology? Are we heading toward an underwater Wild West, or will international law somehow evolve before the next major standoff? It's a lot to think about. Thank you so much for joining today's Explainer. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll see you next time.